Laura Schwartz worked for years in the Clinton White House, and she joins us live from Chicago. Laura, you know, viewership for these speeches has been going down pretty much every year since the year 2000. How important is the president's speech, and who will be watching?
Well, that's a good question, since over 100 million will watch the Super Bowl this Sunday. You know, people at this point in the term are starting to tune things out. They hear Obama speak a lot. They don't always pay attention. Recent polling has found that out. But there still will be folks watching tonight. I think a lot of those are those that are either tuned in on a daily basis, and the political junkies that they are, or others that are really looking for just something from President Obama that may in fact change their lives for the last 2 years. As we heard, a lot about income inequality tonight, a lot of buzz about the minimum wage. That, I think, will have more people tuned in because it's something that right now is on the minds of every American. And so I think that will help. But it's going to be interesting to see how much mileage President Obama gets out of this tonight.
You know, people watching us from around the world have seen and heard how gridlocked Washington has been lately, especially after that government shutdown last year. His pitch was for new gun regulations, but, you know, that never happened. So can the president say anything that will break through that gridlock and really influence lawmakers to act, or are Americans just hearing empty promises?
You know, Elaine, you make a really good point, and I think a lot of people watching tonight are thinking about that gridlock. I really hope President Obama addresses just that. Speaker Boehner, his opposition in the House, for example, this morning mentioned to a breakfast of reporters that even though the House and the administration may be divided, it's not dysfunctional. And right now, a lot of folks see it as dysfunctional. So I think President Obama has to talk about bipartisanship and talk about initiatives of which he can get relationships built and partnerships made and coalitions established. Because if he doesn't frame it up in that effect, I think a lot of people will tune out and think, okay, you mentioned 41 things last year and 2 got done. You know, what are you really telling us? This can be a roadmap when you have a Congress of your own party because you really can get it through, or it can really raise the issues to the minds of the American people, and that's what Barack Obama has to do tonight. Even if it has no chance of passing, he needs to raise it to the public consciousness.
Well, and of course, as Jessica mentioned, this year the president's main message will be income inequality. And Laura, stay with us. I want to bring you a report from our correspondent in Chicago, Rosa Kazan. She's been looking into the fight for higher wages there in President Obama's hometown.
They've become the face of America's growing inequality. Minimum wage earners demanding a raise. The trend, the U.S. president says, that's now jeopardizing America's basic bargain, that if you work hard, you have a chance to succeed.
I believe this is the defining challenge of our time, making sure our economy works for every working American.
The top Republican in Congress, John Boehner, says higher wages won't help.
We know from increases in minimum wage in the past that hundreds of thousands of low-income Americans have lost their jobs.
But that's not what the people believe here in Adgill Gardens on Chicago's South Side. In this community, where President Obama began his career in public service as a community organizer in 1985, little has changed.
He should raise it for everybody. That's what I feel. Everybody needs little help.
Dolores Span has lived here for over 30 years and has been out of work for the last 3.
We need more. It should be at least, in Chicago, I think they should raise it. Minimum wage should at least be like $15, $20.
That's a long way to go from the current federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour. In 4 U.S. states, minimum wages are even lower than that. More than a dozen other states have minimum wages above the federal rate. Illinois is one of those states. But people here say they need more than wages.
You need more jobs. More jobs. Not enough jobs for the community or the people out here.
This is Adgill Gardens' only grocery store, serving almost 4,000 people. The next closest grocery store, which is bigger and offers more variety, is 3 separate bus rides away. And that's what the residents here say they feel the most: isolation. Rosa Kazan, CCTV, Chicago.
Laura Schwartz rejoining us from Chicago. You know, he has 3 years left in his term. You spent time here in Washington. You know how this works. And, you know, he really is in an off year. There's just not a lot of buzz surrounding this particular speech. So how would you advise the president to get his message across to this audience today?
Well, he has to almost speak over the heads of Congress and straight to those cameras and the American people, because regardless as to how many people will watch tonight, these sound bites will be broken down and used over the next few months. And he will have to take this message to the road, get out there to the communities in which they can then respond and tell their representatives and senators, we need the minimum wage. And if that means President Obama packages legislation that allows the corporate tax code to be redone, or if it gives incentives to employers to offset the additional costs that they're going to have because of raising the wage, he's got to work with Congress to make that work, and he has to work with the American people to wage the argument so that it's heard on a national level. Otherwise, it's really tough to just enact change with the pen. He can raise minimum wage for the federal workers that are through contracting agencies that he's talked about yesterday. But to get the full-on minimum wage across the country raised, he really has to create those relationships and tell the American people how he'll do it without the risk of losing jobs.
All right, Laura Schwartz in Chicago, we appreciate your insight. Thanks so much for joining us here on the show.